She ignored my calls all day. At 10 p.m., she finally came home and wore a smirk. "You want to know what happened?" she said. "I had a one-night stand, and I'd do it again." Begin. She pushed through the door at 10. Her heels tapped the tiles, sharp, indifferent. She didn't meet my eyes. She looked right through me. Then that smirk, lipstick stamped with someone else's taste, and the words fell on the table like shards. I had a one-night stand, and I'd do it again. The hush that followed felt heavier than the confession. I didn't shout, I didn't question, I didn't even set my fork down. I finished my bite and nodded once. She read that nod as frailty. What she didn't realize was that in that single motion, something in me had shifted toward retribution. 7 years we'd been married. 7 years of shared rituals, quiet plans whispered in the dark, soft laughter in small rooms. I believed our loyalty was the language we spoke without saying. I'd been there when her storms came. Bankruptcies, family fights, the fragile edges of her self-doubt. I thought I was her harbor. Instead, I had been the floor beneath her feet. The warning signs were always there. The sudden coldness, the unexplained late nights, the phone laid face down buzzing in the dark. But I chose to ignore them. I wanted to keep the story I'd invested in. Then that night, her smirk tore the veil away. Pain arrived first, then a terrible clarity. I didn't need to confront her. Battles aren't won by shouting. They're won by preparation. The next morning, when she stretched and called for coffee, I stood in the doorway and watched her move. She expected the same pliant husband who folded beneath her moods. She didn't see the mental ledger already compiling behind my eyes. I began quietly. Passwords, accounts, legal papers. I tightened the locks without fanfare. When she slept, I rifled through her phone while her defenses were down. Names, numbers, photographs, each entry catalogued, encrypted, tucked away. I spent 2 weeks in deliberate silence, playing the role she knew. Made dinners, brushed her cheek with a kiss, let her believe the storm had passed. Meanwhile, I was arranging pieces on a board she couldn't even imagine. I consulted an attorney, shifted assets, closed accounts she assumed were joint but weren't. The house, the savings. I made sure the legal scaffolding favored me. Her car sat registered in my name. Every platform she leaned on, I removed grain by grain until there was scarcely anything to stand on. She was too busy savoring her freedom to notice the foundations being undermined. Then I set the trap. A friend who knew how to dig out deleted messages recovered the threads from her phone. The litany of encounters was sickening. Different names, different nights, every exchange time-stamped and impossible to deny. I printed everything, not to shame her in private, but to build a public legal record. I waited for the right move. One Friday, she dressed up and said she was meeting a friend. I let her leave. I followed at a distance, methodical. I watched them laughing in a bar, her hand tracing his arm the way it used to trace mine. I photographed, I filmed, the evidence mounted. When she returned, smelling of perfume and whiskey just after midnight, I was already seated at the dining table. Documents and printouts lay before me like the tools of a calculated craftsman. She frowned. "What's all this?" she asked. "Your legacy," I said. Her eyes skimmed the pages, color drained from her face. She fumbled for denials, for excuses, but I cut her off. I know every name, every night, every message. I could dismantle her with what I had. Her voice broke. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because you smirked," I murmured. The next week she woke expecting the life she'd always known. Coffee in bed, a husband who folded at her whims. Instead, she found silence and emptied drawers. Her car was gone, repossessed. Her cards cancelled, access to funds frozen. She was left with the clothes she wore and the hollowness of being discovered. I filed for divorce with a mountain of evidence, adultery documented, financial irregularities exposed. She wasn't just losing me, she was losing everything. When she tried to fight, her own messages strangled her case. Courts rarely side with habitual betrayers. The house stayed mine. The accounts stayed mine. She walked away with shame and almost nothing else. The finale happened at her sister's birthday. A cruel irony. She arrived trying to play victim, to rewrite the tale. Conversations hushed, curious eyes turned. I remained composed. When she opened her mouth to spin the story, I laid the proof out for everyone to see. Screenshots, photos, dates, names. The room collapsed into stunned silence. Her sister wept. Her father rose and left. She crumpled into a chair, face buried in her hands, sobbing not because she was sorry, but because she had been unmasked. In that moment, the balance shifted. Power slid away from her and into my hands. Do I regret what I did? No. Regret belongs to those who still love. I stopped loving her the instant she smirked and declared she would do it again. Now mornings belong to me. I make my coffee, sip it slowly, unobserved and unperformed. Her betrayal didn't break me. It taught me to burn with method and silence until the conflagration consumed her life and spared mine. I don't hate her anymore. I feel nothing. And that absence, that blankness, is the sweetest vengeance of all.